right, welcome. We're so excited to be here. We have an awesome event for you tonight. We're really excited to do a screening of the Maury Island incident, and we have the filmmaker Steve Edmiston here to give a brief introduction to the film, and then we're going to watch it, and then we'll do a Q&A afterwards and with Steve. And after that, we're going to do an alien open mic and share any of our own personal stories that we have. So I'm Crystal, and I'm just really grateful to have all of you here, and I hope you really enjoy what we're doing for you. All right, thank you, Steve. There's so much about the Maury Island incident that I absolutely love, and it's kind of why we came together to do this event, is because to me, a lot of us have stories, and we might not really want to tell those stories because of what someone might think. And I love that Steve took this story that he investigated, and a lot of people say it's not true, it might be a hoax, but he really dug into it. And so that's one of the points of us having an alien open mic, is for all of us to tell our stories in a room where people aren't going to judge us. They're not going to say, oh, that's not true, that can't happen. It doesn't matter. Like, maybe we just have some stories, and to us, they're really real. And we, with Universe on Earth, have been traveling North and South America the last 2 months listening to people's stories. And I'm gonna say that my mind just continues to be blown. Like, I don't have any reason to believe that anyone's stories aren't true, because they really feel it. And so that's why we're here, is to listen to the stories that people feel, and to hear the things that maybe otherwise you wouldn't want to tell someone in a room where you don't know everybody. But we like to say that we make a safe space, and so if anyone has any doubt of anything, then you could just leave right now, because we're going to tell some stories of things that we feel are really true. So we have a few people signed up, and I also want to encourage you, if you didn't sign up but you do want to share a story, that's awesome, because you're here and we want to hear it. So if you do want to tell a story, maybe make your way over to Alder over here and let her know, and we'll make sure that you have time to tell your story. So I think we're going to, actually, I'm going to start with Alder, and she's going to tell a little bit about the Universe on Earth and the TV series that we're making based on all these stories. Not based on it, but highlighting them, I think is the best way to say it. And then we'll get into some storytelling.
Okay, hello everyone, I'm Alder. I'm a co-producer along with Crystal for Universe on Earth, and gosh, I really enjoyed that movie. I've been wanting to see it forever. I've heard about it, I've been interested in it, so that was really a treat, and the production value was incredible. So thank you for that, Steve. So our show, we are the Universe on Earth, and we're doing a YouTube series. It's about, right now we're filming 8 episodes. They're gonna be 22 minutes long, and when we're done with it, we're gonna release them all. So you can follow us on the Universe on Earth on all social media. It's, our website is youonearth.com. And you can come contact us for all the, where you can follow it. But I wanted to talk a little bit about our show. I'm a filmmaker, I've been doing this for a long time, and doing this type of film, this type of show where you're talking about alien stories, it kind of gives you a lot of weird looks, like, oh my gosh, what are you doing again? Like, you kind of feel like you're crazy. However, once we started filming, our first production was in Puerto Rico. We filmed there about 2.5 weeks. And so we got there, and I put out a bunch. I also live there right now as well. But we went there and we put a bunch of ads out on social media, on Facebook, on everything. And at first we weren't getting a lot of response. Then little by little, people started trickling in. And so there's people that came, but they really were worried about it. So in this type of filmmaking, I've interviewed tons of people for lots of stuff, but this is different. People are very scared to tell their story. They make the meeting with you, they don't show up. They're like, okay, I'm gonna show up this time. So it's a lot of like, you know, people don't call you back, and it's a lot of like hunting them down. However, like the first guy that I came across back in the 80s, he was out surfing in Puerto Rico on the west side in a town called Aguadilla. And he was coming back from his surfing, and he looked up and there was a flying saucer type of thing there, and he doesn't want anyone in the town to know about the story. Anyway, it came down low and he looked up and there was like kind of hieroglyphics on it. He followed, he has a huge description, and he was terrified. He's been holding this since the 80s, hasn't told one person. He's like, please don't put it on camera. But I just need to tell somebody because it's all I think about day after day. So this is kind of emotional because it was such a big deal to him. And I feel like that this is why we're doing it, because we aren't judging, we want to hear the story. And after that, it was like one by one, especially in Puerto Rico itself, there's a lot of reports of craft coming in and out of the water, like underground bases. I don't know if you guys have seen the one in Aguadilla where it's coming over the airport, this craft flies into the water, comes back out, and splits into two. And this, you know, this you can see on social media, but there's a lot of reports there. We found the people in these towns, you know, we traveled into the mountains in a place called Utuado, and there's these stories as well. People that have, some of the people that live there haven't left the area. They've never even been down to the water. So they have similar sightings, similar stories, and they're all in different places, and nobody's talking about it. We've also came into the US and been, you know, lots of places. We were just at Sedona last week. But what I'm seeing is like, in interviewing so many people, a lot of these stories are somewhat similar. You'll see the traces of like certain type of lights and how they go, and it's very interesting. So anyway, we're really excited about sharing our story. We're glad you're here, and if you have any questions about the show, you want to be part of it, anything, any leads, come talk to us. We have Crystal here, Alex, and Nyla. I don't know where she is right now. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Alder. I want to add to one thing that Alder was saying about like why we're here. We were interviewing a man and his wife who saw the same thing, and they saw this in 1978, I believe, in New York City. And as they were talking, they were remembering things. Like it's like they hadn't told the story together to anyone in a long time, and they said none of their family or friends really wanted to hear their story. So this is kind of maybe one of the first times they're telling us the story. And as they're talking, they're kind of realizing they have lost time. Like, they're like, wait, do you remember getting from where we saw the craft to your brother's house? And she's like, no, I remember getting there. But like, and so they're realizing all these things. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh yeah, I've got this metal thing in my finger. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I have an x-ray of it. Like, I was at the doctor doing an MRI and something hurt really bad. And so they took me to x-ray, and he's got this like implant in his finger. And he sent me the x-ray. And I'm like, wait, and because I've done so many of these interviews and had my own experiences, and I'm like, are you sure you've never been on a craft? Like, and he's like, I don't know anymore. I feel like I'm not, like, it's like he was remembering all these things. And so as we were leaving, we gave him a referral to a regression hypnosis therapist so that he could maybe uncover these things. And as we were leaving, they were both like, thank you so much for coming over and listening to our story. And it feels like a healing thing for people to be able to tell their stories. So that is like one of the main reasons why we want to do this and have this platform, is to heal these stories, at least heal our own feelings behind them. So, so we have a few people signed up. I wanted to see if I can't see anyone, so is Troy Bacon, you want to go? Okay. Okay, so Troy's going, I don't know exactly, I know Troy has many stories, so Troy, there's a lot of people here probably from SUFON, from the Seattle UFO Network, and myself and Troy and Carol, and I don't know if Mary's here, we're all coordinators for SUFON, and we help make events, and if you have any ideas about events that you want held, or if you have anything like that, go ahead and let myself, or Troy, or Carol know, but we'll listen to Troy's story.
That is a very bright light. So, story I feel called to share is not of this world or this time, but it is a story very personal to me, and I will explain also how it relates to Earth at this time too. I'm a walk-in soul. I'm not the same soul that was born into this body 28 years ago. November of 2020, I came here as a walk-in, and shortly after that, I was in this dark night, figuring out who I am all over again. And so this one day, I took kind of a long nap, and I woke up from a very interesting dream. But it was a dream of, it felt like looking through somebody else's eyes at a scene. In the dream, I remember looking out a large window, basically, of a large airship cockpit out at other airships. They had golden insignias on them that I would describe as looking like 3 claw marks, but very stark and simplified, kind of like a logo, but I recognized them as the enemy airships. But there was just a weird energy about seeing that and that experience in that dream. Then I woke up and I went out to dinner with family members. I was pretty quiet at the dinner because I was overlaid also with that time and space and reality. I had apparently not all of me had come back in this body from that. But basically what I remembered is a lot of that lifetime. That was a mission that I had led as at that time of the general of the Syrian Space Forces, essentially, 2.8 million years ago. And I had led a mission with my team from the planet Andara, orbiting Sirius A, to fly commandeered Draco airships into the Draco base, then detonate electrocution bombs. And we all teleported out. But quite unfortunately, myself especially, I think my teammates also felt the karmic backlash of electrocuting that whole planet. The way that we justified that is, first I'd gotten clearance from what was then the version of a Syrian council on that planet. Again, this is 2.8 million years ago in Earth time. The day that I was essentially promoted or coronated to what was the general of the Syrian Space Forces, that was the day that the Draco had decided to split in half my original home planet in that system. They knew what they were doing, and I also had a dream in this body after the walk-in, in which I was remembering more of what the Draco had done, and one of them, a very large Draco, had been bragging to us or telling us that we should be grateful that they did not split more of our planets in half, and they only split one in half. And so that was kind of like a very impactful lifetime that I've investigated and unraveled and healed from. And so the way that story relates to Earth right now is that was an episode in which I'd ended the war with the Draco, who were in a war with Sirius A. Another psychic also said that the Andromeda Greys were involved in that. Anyway, it was a war in which they were trying to get a hold of our advanced weapons and technology, which gave us the upper hand over them. Some weapons and technology which Earth is not even allowed to possess at this time. But I can say that now the dynamics of the Draco have changed, probably after that war and others that they may have lost in. And of course, the Draco have played a hand in recent Earth wars in our history. But from what I've heard and what I feel and what I've been told by my Syrian family too, is that the Draco on this planet are losing. They may be very scarce on this planet now. And essentially, in recent history, the dynamics have changed to, instead of deadly war, it's more of an informational war in which they've been covering up and deceiving and trying to keep people in the dark, but of course we're not anymore, and we have no reason to be. And now all of us, especially those who remember other lifetimes from other planets, are now liberated to speak out publicly, those of us who feel called to, and speak about not only our memories but our abilities and the truth of why we're here, which is to now recover ourselves because we currently have the liberty to become a new people, basically, instead of the old versions of society that used to be very doubtful of the UFO phenomenon, UFO presence back in the 1940s and 50s and such. And now we're here and we know that our visitors are here with us. And so that's how the narrative has changed now. There's more I could say, of course, I can go on and on, but essentially we now are of a people that in this generation and future generations, I know, will be unifying like we've never done before and claiming our planet so that it will eventually become immune to forces like the Draco evil. And so that is my Syrian lifetime story that I wanted to share.
Awesome, thank you, Troy. I know that one of the things that I've realized that's really important is to think less with our minds and more with our hearts. And when we go into like deep meditation or even dreamlike states, and to think about, not so much think, but feel the things that you feel. And what I've realized is there's a lot going on. There's dimensions, there's timelines, there's planets, there's universes, there's all sorts of things, but there are things that exist right now here on this planet, and we are all here on this planet right now, and what's most important is what you feel in your heart. So all of those stories are super important, and what's most important is what you feel in your heart. So I think that's really what I've kind of learned, is stay true to the things that I feel, and then, I don't know, your mind opens up to all sorts of possibilities that we were maybe programmed to not believe. So, let's see, there's people that want to tell stories tonight, but they're a little hesitant, and so I don't want to like call you out in case you want to tell your story, but I'm going to say if there's one of those people that wants to tell their story, now is a good time to tell it. Otherwise, I also have multiple stories. I just don't want to put there's people that weren't sure if they wanted to share. So if any of the people that I talked to that weren't quite sure, if you do want to share, we have an open mic and we have an audience. And
I'll go.
okay, I can't see anything. You know, but I hear an eye. Do you want me to introduce your name?
New Dave.
All right.
Hey everybody. Hi. I'm David E. Ballard, stage name New Dave. I got sober about 10 years ago, so I figured I'd give myself a new nom de plume to kind of remind myself that, hey, I'm a new person. But I've always been into, aliens, UFOs, big giant Star Trek fan when I was a kid. So as an adult, I've been a TV writer producer for like over 25 years, generally in the unscripted world, as they say. So a lot of cable TV, History Channel, Science Channel, just all those shows that used to be on TV. And during that time, I got to meet and or interview a lot of like, cops, ex-cops, ex-military guys, just all kinds of government people. I worked on a lot of weird shows. So if you guys remember that it's pretty famous Fox special, the Alien Autopsy special. I worked for the executive producer of that show, and we actually tracked down the people that made that film. Some English guys shot it in a garden shed in a suburb of London. But the reason I'm up here is because I have a podcast called The Anunnaki Ambassador. And the reason I have that podcast is because I met a couple of people in the course of working on these shows. One was a Air Force combat controller. I don't know if you've ever heard of those guys, but they're basically like special forces of the Air Force. So there's the PJs, the pararescue jumpers, or they rescue down pilots basically, and the combat controllers, which are guys that parachute in, and their essential job is to take over like enemy airports and guide in United States airplanes just as a normal air traffic controller does at a regular civilian airport. So they're basically like Navy SEALs who could do all that crazy stuff and kill you with their pinky or whatever, but they're also guys that you could walk into any airport and run the air traffic, the control tower. So anyway, he was my first source. He said he got sort of plucked from that team, which is already a pretty elite squad of guys, and he had this sort of background as sort of a kind of like a genius. He told me his father was in the RAF during World War II. They gave his mother some sort of experimental drug when she was pregnant, and he wound up being this kind of super genius kid. They put him in this special school for super genius kids, and they eventually shipped him out of the combat controllers to the very famous Area 51. And he spent a year there, and he said his job was to, he'd go to work every day in this lab, and for 1 year, their job was to study this thing. He said it looked like basically like a metal ashtray, and it was contained in this kind of glass case, and it would just float there in midair, no sound, no heat, no nothing. And his job, these other guys, was for a year to study this thing and try and, break it, chip it, find out why it was floating. They never could. At the end of his 1 year of service, they thanked him very much, and off he went, but he had a bunch of other stories. The other guy I met was this guy named, you may or may not have heard of him. His name is Maximilien de Lafayette. And he's this very eccentric French guy who I met while working on a show. He's written all these books. You can look him up. He's so many books on Amazon. Some of you may have heard of Zecharia Sitchin, who has written also a lot of books about the Anunnaki. I knew Max. I never met him in person, but I talked to him many times on the phone. I knew Zecharia Sitchin. I talked to him a few times on the phone. Sweet guy, really nice guy. But he was an accountant, he was not a trained linguist, right? So a lot of the stuff that he has in his books is not accurate, The Anunnaki, according to Max, I'll get into him, yes, it's a real thing, but the Anunnaki, first of all, that name does not mean those who to earth from heaven came, and they didn't come here looking for gold, and so I just wanted to give you a little background on that. Max comes from a long line of people who were descended from the actual Anunnaki, and they're called Ulemas, and he sort of made me an honorary Ulema. which is an Anunnaki word, which means basically, you know, wise man or expert or something. So the reason I call myself the Anunnaki ambassador is because it is a fascinating story. You know, they're according to Max, and you listen to my podcast, you'll find all this out. It's a real thing, and the Anunnaki are this super advanced race that created us. You know, their civilization is 7 billion years old. Planet Earth is about 4 something billion years old. So their civilization alone is 3 billion years older than our solar system. So that gives you some idea of how advanced they are. They are transdimensional beings. They can move backwards and forwards in time. They can shapeshift. They can split themselves off and create a whole new life for themselves in another timeline, in another dimension, while this person over here keeps doing his thing. They live to be about 450,000 years old. At the end of that time, they can then transfer their life essence into a new vessel, into a new body, and in essence, they're immortal. At some point, their life energy does sort of, you know, run out. But, you know, we're talking about very advanced people. The reason we exist is because they created, according to Max, and by the way, Max Similian was also an Air Force employee. He was one of the guys that his job was to act as a translator. When an extraterrestrial, you know, race, you know, comes here, now we're pretty familiar with them, but back obviously in 1947, it was like, you know, ridiculous. Now we have technology and stuff that we can use. But back then, you know, 60s, 70s, 80s, they needed guys that could, you know, that had skills, and he's a very skilled linguist, speaks many languages, so they bring these guys in to try to communicate with people that would, you know, meet our government representatives. So anyway, the Anunnaki wanted to do basically a biology experiment, because they're very inquisitive people. They're always, you know, they're very into art, science, you know, learning. When you live to be 450,000 years old, you need to find things to occupy your time. So they thought, hey, you know, let's do a science experiment. Let's do a biology experiment. Let's create some new life forms. So they got permission from their authority figures, whatever, and they decided to create a solar system. So that's where we come from. They created our solar system as a science experiment. And since they live so long and they can transfer their body, you know, their life energy into body after body after body, it's no skin off their nose to hang around for 4 billion years and wait for, you know, life to evolve. So when Earth became, you know, relatively livable, that's when they showed up. So they came here about 450,000 years ago, which is where you get all the, you know, legends of Atlantis and, you know, giants walking the earth and everything, because they are about on average about 8 feet tall, 8 to 10 feet tall. There's another race called the Igigi, which are kind of similar, but more warlike. It's kind of where we get the Star Trek, you know, concept of like the Klingons from. There's the Naftarians, which are sort of like these bird-like, you know, beings. And of course, there's the Greys. And the Greys are this sort of mysterious cybernetic race, clouded in mystery exactly where they came from. I've talked to Max several times about it. Even he doesn't know it. They're really mysterious creatures. But they do come from originally the Zeta Reticulum system. The Anunnaki come from the Aldebaran system. But they're not good dudes. You know, they basically got kicked out of their own corner of the galaxy, and we're looking for a place to hide out, in essence. And, you know, planet Earth was uninhabited a couple million years ago, or until, you know, that whole time, but starting about 2 million years ago is when the Greys figured, okay, cool, there's a uninhabited planet in a very remote little backwater part of the galaxy. Let's go live there. So they've been, you know, the big heads, the eyes, the little guys, 3 feet tall. They've been living on planet Earth for about 2 million years. They live underground and underwater. The main base is in Dulce, New Mexico. They have an underwater base in Alaska, and they have an underwater base, and you guessed it, where the Bermuda Triangle is. So the vast majority of flying saucers that you've ever heard about are either the Greys just kind of flying around what they consider to be their home world, right? They do not consider themselves to be extraterrestrials or aliens. They think this is their planet. They are intraterrestrials. They live here. They've been here a lot longer than we have. So the Anunnaki created us, did some genetic engineering, started about 150,000 years ago, which is why you go from Homo erectus to Neanderthal to Homo sapiens. And if you look at the archaeological record, the human brain pan doubles in size about 150,000 years ago. Nobody can explain why. There's still no scientific consensus as to why our brains doubled in size virtually overnight in terms of geological time. The reason was because the Anunnaki were here, they're building stuff. That's why you see these crazy cities in the middle of the Amazon, these big snake mounds in the Northeast. Any sort of huge ancient construction, that's the Anunnaki just doing their thing all over Earth. But over time, they're like, hey, maybe we could use a few extra hands. So that's when they get in this genetic engineering program where they start, the Homo erectus, then Neanderthal, and they gradually sort of programmed us to be these sort of drones. And over time, they got it right. That's where the, Garden of Eden came from. We eventually did become, there's a man and a woman that could mate. But the problem was, they did a little bit too good of a job. We started mating like crazy, like rabbits. And over time, you're like, okay, it's cool to have some extra help, but man, these guys are, they're kind of uncontrollable, sort of like herding cats. So at some point, the leader, at the time, Anu, said, just let them all die. Let's create, bring up like a meteor or something that causes this big flood. And, and his son, Enki, was fond of us. So he's, that's where you get the Noah's Ark thing, where it's like, okay, there was a time when somebody was saved by, God. We were saved by God. So ever since then, we've just been pretty much on our own. The beginning of the Sumerian culture and the Egyptian culture, Sumeria is about 4,000 BC. Egypt is about 3,000 BC, more or less. As those civilizations were starting, the first civilizations on Earth, that's when the very, very last Anunnaki were leaving. They're like, we're out of here. We can't deal with these guys anymore. So that's where you get all the, the myths and legends of gods, and Gilgamesh making the goddess angry for not wanting to sleep with her anymore and all that. Because there were some lower class Anunnaki. They were the only ones that were left. And even they left eventually. So that's kind of the general nutshell history of Earth and man. But the Greys are still with us. That thing that crashed in Roswell was, a Grey craft. And the reason all these flying saucers started appearing after, in 1947, was because they finally realized, oh my God, these stupid humans figured out how to make an atomic bomb. And if we started blowing off atomic bombs, they would lose their home. Sorry about that. So they started flying around investigating, and that's primarily where most of the flying saucer sightings came from. The Nazis also had a flying saucer program, which is very successful. It's another long story. But I'll wrap up by saying that the reason there were so many abductions in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s is because the Greys made a deal with President Eisenhower to give us some, technology, some weaponry or whatever, in exchange for basically leaving us alone and giving them about 100,000 people a year to experiment on. Because they are dying. They are a dying race. They have a disease called progeria, which is like when if you see a kid with progeria, it looks like an old man. Like you age really fast. So they've been cloning themselves for millions of years. So just like when you take a Xerox and you Xerox and Xerox and Xerox, it gets worse and worse. Same thing with their genetic code. So now, over this 50-year time, they've been able to create a hybrid race. And they've perfected it, which is why there are no more abductions. Now, there are thousands, hundreds of thousands, I don't know, who knows, of hybrid human gray beings running around in human society, indistinguishable from normal people. And they are not our friends. Again, they look at us as like these kind of dumb animals. We're like insects to them almost. So just ended on a happy note there. We are, basically being controlled in the shadows by these weird hybrid beings and the pure grays. So there's a lot going on. One last thing, according to Max, Earth is the dumpster of the universe. We are the lowest form of intelligent life in the universe. So it's cool that we have families, we love each other. But, on the other hand, we're dropping atomic bombs on each other, we're killing each other, raping, If you look at the history of the human race, not great, But the good news is, supposedly, Anunnaki are coming back, which is basically what the Book of Revelations is about. There is going to come a time when the whole earth just kind of gets the reset button hit. But, until that time, enjoy your popcorn. I'm New Dave, host of the Anunnaki Ambassador. Great event, give it up. I love this. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dave. I do think that we're here right now, and we have every power within ourselves to be as much love and peace as we can. And, maybe we can flip the script a little bit. We don't have to have war anymore. We don't have to have all these things that fell from grace with humans, We can be new humans. So, thank you, Dave. All right, okay, we have another presentation, and if you also feel brave enough to tell your story, then let us know.
My name's Randy Klinkenbeard, and my story is back in 1979 when I was a senior at White River High School. I would go to school a half a day, and then I'd work at a cabinet shop the other half. Well, me and a friend of mine were we went out to Highway Grocery, and we're leaving Highway Grocery going up 410, and just like quarter mile up the road, there was this great big flying saucer. It was treetop level. It was about as high as the ceiling. And I pull over in my car, and I get out, and about 5 cars pulling behind me, and we're just looking at this thing. It took up both lanes of the road. It was huge. Didn't make a sound. And it had like white and blue lights. It was a circular object, and then white and blue lights were going on the bottom of it this way, and then the red light was going the opposite way above that. And we watched it for like a minute and just sat there and watched it and just wondering what it was, And then finally it didn't make any sound at all, and then it just drifted off over the trees, and I got in my car and I flew down the road and took a left and tried to go find it, but never did find it again. But the next day in the papers it said Washington, Oregon, and Idaho all had sightings, and tried telling people at work about it, and they said, yeah, well, would you guys smoke? And that was my story. Thank you.
Thank you. I know I've heard a lot of stories that have a very similar craft. The lights and the red light on the top is a very similar story that I've heard. So I'm sure there's a lot of people that have seen that craft, and thank you for sharing. It's really, it's a profound thing to see something that you can't explain or that you think isn't real. You know, if we're like told certain things are real and certain things aren't, and then you experience something that is like completely not your reality, it's really hard to have a vocabulary even to say what that is, to try to communicate that to someone else. And I know that my experiences have a lot of times been without vocabulary, just telepathic communication, and things that are very difficult to explain in story format. So to be able to articulate what you saw that is so unknown can really push your limits of what we're taught, I guess. Is there anyone else that wants to tell their story or that has any questions? Because I know a lot of times these stories, and it doesn't have to be a question for me, it can be for whoever talked to. Okay, sorry, I can't see. Okay, yeah, right here. Do you want to come up and tell it? Sure. Okay, awesome. It's really super awesome for everyone to be here. I'm really grateful, and I love hearing all the stories. It makes me happy.
Hello, everybody. My name is Barb Shoup. I live up in Greenwater. I'm slightly off topic for this night. I'm a Bigfooter, and I take a lot of people out in the woods, and we camp several times a year, and we document our experiences, and some strange things happen when we're out there. There's one particular experience I'd like to share with you because I do believe it was UFO related. This was about 4 years ago in May. We had a camp out, and I had a friend that was there who I hadn't seen in many years. We spent several hours visiting till about 2:30 in the morning. And I had a new puppy. She was about 7 weeks old. I just got her. She had been sleeping in the tent while we were visiting. And we were hearing footsteps running all around the tent the whole time we're in there. So we know the Sasquatch are there with us, okay? So the puppy wakes up. She's got to pee. It's late. It's time to go to bed. So I take her out. She goes over. She does her business. My tent was right across the little area from where we were at. I had to pee too, so I went behind my car. I squatted down, and I'm thinking, I know the Sasquatch are right there watching me. It's regular the way that it works. I'm okay with it. I go into my tent. I lay down on my cot. The puppy goes down into the bottom of my sleeping bag. I reached over, and I turned off my lantern. And the second that I turned off my lantern, this huge, brilliant white light illuminates the front of my tent. And the first thing that goes through my head is, I knew they were watching me pee. That's the first thing I'm thinking, okay? So then the second thing I'm thinking is, there is a person standing in front of my tent that is completely backlit by this brilliant light. And this, when we did the recreation, we realized that this person had to be right in front of my tent to make such a crisp outline. So I'm laying there and I'm watching this individual, and all of a sudden this brilliant white light shifts up and the person disappears, and now I can see something like this that's hanging over my tent, across the front of my tent. And I'm thinking, huge hand, and then it clicked in my head, it's the limbs from the tree. The light had just gone up into the trees and was now shining down through the limbs. And at that point, the light shifts down into a corner, just the low corner in the front of my tent. It's barely there anymore. And a portal opened inside my tent, just above me. It went from nothing to about here and back down. and it gave me a view into somebody's living room somewhere. It wasn't necessarily in our time. It had a very rustic fireplace with a fire going in it, a brick fireplace. There was nothing fancy about it. There were 2 brown couches on either side. The room was very dimly lit. There was nobody there, but it just went from here to here and back. And in that second that it was open, that's what I saw. And I believe that light was alien related. Earlier in that camp out, we had other people who were up on top of the mountain behind camp who had been watching this light going from one end of the valley to the other. And at one point it came right towards them. And it was a huge, brilliant light. And when we tried to do the recreation, we couldn't come up with a light in camp that would shine as bright as that was. It was so bright that it made the rain fly on my tent disappear. And a few nights later, at that point, there was a film crew had come in and was making a documentary about our camp out, and they wanted to hear this story. So they didn't want to see the Coleman logo on the side of my tent, so I had thrown a blanket over the top, and so that it wouldn't be seen. And I forgot the blanket was over the top of my tent. So a few nights later, I'm in my tent, and I see this brilliant light coming back again, except this time it just kind of like came through and it flew over. And it was so bright that, again, it made the rain fly disappear, but I could tell that there was a blanket. It couldn't shine through the blanket, but it was so brilliant and so bright that, it just shined right into my tent like the tent walls weren't even there. And I'm sure that light up in the sky had something to do with the aliens, and I'm sure that there is a strong connection between the aliens and the Sasquatch. And if you want to check out my YouTube channel, there's some great stuff. I have fairies, I have Sasquatch, I have a cloaker video that a lot of people think is an alien. It's during one of our campouts, an individual just dropped straight down underneath a log, and when I saw him pop up on the other side, he was a Sasquatch, but he was cloaked when he dropped down, and you can see the pixelated individual as he drops down in the video. So that's my alien Sasquatch story.
So I definitely believe that Sasquatch, fairies, all the interdimensional beings are all here on Earth and all related. I mean, we're all here, so it's related somehow. Definitely think it is. I know one of our producers actually he's our editor and researcher. He's based in Massachusetts, but he is definitely a cryptid researcher by his passion. And so I've been on a Sasquatch hunt, I don't know if you want to say hunting, but Sasquatch expedition with him on Mount Shasta before. And I definitely think that those beings are there. The shaman we were with described the Sasquatch as 7-dimensional creatures that can vibrate into our vibrations and then also out of it too. So that's why we don't quite catch them. That's what the shaman explained to me anyway. I think it makes a lot of sense. But I think the research you're doing with Sasquatch is really important, and I'm glad you're doing it. I'll definitely check out your YouTube. Is there anyone else that wants to tell their story? Okay. Okay. Oh, I think we have 2 people. Oh, it's okay. Either one. Awesome. I've seen Briar though.
My name's Penny. I'm from Kingston, Washington. Not originally. I guess I'm from New York. But my story is about Kingston, Washington. I'm a little bit nervous because this is really out there kind of thing, but I'll do my best. It kind of goes in line with Barb's story too. And it was January 2020, and I was having this like vivid dream. But it felt like all vivid dreams felt I was really there. And where I was on a ship. And it was all white and bright, a lot like this, all white walls. And before me was these 8 to 10 bassinets. And in each of those bassinets was a baby Sasquatch. And it was amazing because I love the Sasquatch people. So it was really just like a total blessing that I was there to witness this. And then I got the message to love them, enjoy them. But before I even got the message, these baby Sasquatch, that is so bright, these baby Sasquatch were sending me love. They were showering me with unconditional love. And it was amazing. And I didn't want to leave them. And when I was kind of told, you're there to love and be with them, I was so grateful for that moment to be with them. It was a true honor and a blessing. One particular Sasquatch baby was beckoning me and constantly wanting attention with me and reaching out for me. And I spent a lot of time with him, and I spent time with each of the other baby Sasquatch. And the next thing I know, I'm waking up and it's 2:45, and I see my husband at the back window. It's a French door beyond our bathroom, and he's looking out with a flashlight. And I get up and I go over and I said, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, something's out here." So I go to the window and I see this huge cloud. It was enormous, and lightning's like coming out of it, it's flashing. And then there's these sonic booms, and it was like 8 to 10 sonic booms. And I was like, wow, they're leaving. And then I go and I get in bed and go back to sleep. And I wake up at 6:30 in the morning, and I remember the whole thing. And I'm a journaler. I write everything down. So I took my journal out and I wrote everything down that I could remember. But one thing that always stayed with me is I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave them. And that hung with me, still does. It really tears me up. I had that with me so strong for 2 weeks that I missed him. I really missed him. And that's my story, and I'm Penny Coons. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have one more, and I think that's actually the perfect timing too, because I think we have time for one more. And I don't know your name. Barbara.
So I left these on, but I didn't know about that. I'm sitting back there and I'm shaking. Every time that happened, it means get up, Barb. And I just listened to Barbara Shoops, some of her videos this morning. So I thought, okay, that's another one. I'll go back to a couple of little stories. Probably in 66, 67, I was 10 or 11. And I used to spend the night at my friend's house. Grew up in Burien, right next to the airport. It's all third runway now. We'd spend the night out on her back deck. And we'd stay up every night and we'd just watch the skies. And then we started watching what we didn't know what they were. We called them UFOs, but we weren't into it. And I just knew that, oh, we're so close to the airport, the radars will pick them up. We're safe. You know, the airport knows whatever it is up there. But we'd watch like what's described 90 degree, like the size of a satellite or a little bit bigger, just shooting back and forth. And all night long we would do that. And every time we got together, so that was for me the beginning of kind of opening my mind up to that kind of stuff. But over the years throughout my life, you go through so many different things. You go through paranormal things too, depending on who you are. You go through a lot of things that give you testimonies of certain things in life that we don't know anything about. So over the years, I would say about 15 years ago, I was sitting with my mom at her kitchen table, and I had brought over some pictures I'd drawn. Over the years, I'd been through different kinds of therapy and all sorts of crap where you draw everything out. And I had a lot of weird dreams. And I drew pictures of my dreams. And I brought these pictures to my mom and I showed them to her. And she goes, oh, she says, you got to show this to Ron. And I go, why? Ron's my brother. And she proceeded to tell me about, I think I must have been, if he was probably 5th, 6th grade at the time, and I'm 5 years older, I'm in high school. And each time we got older, we got the big upstairs bedroom, or the little one. And as the other kid moved out, and we had 7 kids in the family, and it was my turn to get that room. In my dream, I remember waking up and looking out the window, and above my neighbor's house, we all had big houses going down 12th Avenue. There was a huge craft above the house. And this is in a dream, and in my dream, I'm going, well, that's really weird. It was beautiful, though. So my picture was a picture of the neighbor's house with this big craft. And the reason why Mom wanted me to show it to Ron was when he was in 5th or 6th grade, this is the time I was in high school maybe, he had a paper route. And he and his friend Trey would get up early Sunday mornings, get their bikes ready in the basement, and go out the basement door. It was kind of an uphill door, or hill. And as they went out this one Sunday morning, they looked up and they saw a giant craft above the Gannett's house. And they freaked out. They ran in the house. They told Mom about it. They refused to do the paper route. And Mom said I had to get up and take them on their paper route, but she never saw anything. Well, later on, Ron did see those pictures, and he freaked out. And he didn't believe that it was just a dream. It was just something. He always went through weird things in life. He had a hard life. But that was also kind of a confirmation to me, even though a lot of what my rabbit hole things I deal with in dream state, I choose not to go further on a lot of this stuff. I find that as I put the pieces together, and been into Sasquatch lately, and it's all fitting together somehow it is. But I also know that over the years, that as I've gone through my life and ups and downs like everybody, and all the rough stuff you go through, and you still come out of it. And I got a 50-year reunion coming up next week, and I'm so elated that I'm even here. I am grateful for the experiences, and even though I don't know a lot about this UFO stuff, and it does scare me because some of the experiences that I have had have not been the greatest as far as feeling comfortable with all of it. And I'm still putting it together and tying in everything as far as, and paranormal, I mean, there's so many different things we have to look at, but somehow I know they all fit together. And don't be scared to share this. I don't know any of you people. I've lived here 25 years, but I'm just amazed that this is being done in Enumclaw, and we've come a long way.
All right. Thank you so much for coming, and I just have to give just a really quick background about why we are in Enumclaw, actually. So I went to high school here, and I graduated in '95, and I only really lived here during high school. But I had some really awesome experiences, mostly out near Mount Rainier, Crystal Mountain, Greenwater, things that if I had stayed living in the city, I never would have experienced. And I feel like it really shaped who I was. And then we were at a SUFON event that MUFON was doing, and Jeff Kindle was talking about the 30-mile radius of Mount Rainier and how there's all these anomalies and strange things happening. And at the same time, we're working on this Universal on Earth show, and I'm like, wait, we have to make a stop here. Because there's a lot of strange things that happen, and I know firsthand there's strange things that happen, and it was very influential on opening my mind from a young age of possibilities of realms and things that could exist. And so when we're in North and South America going to these UFO hotspots, I just, like, this was a special stop on our trip. And yeah, so I hope you follow along with our trip. It's youonearth.com, and all the socials is theuniverseonearth.com. So thanks for being here.